Welcome back to another episode of Hockey Weekly. I'm your host, Tyler Lizotte, here with Brendan Pawliw. Brendan, how are you doing?
Good. Nice to be back at the rink. Prince George Cougars were at home against the Seattle Thunderbirds. It's nice to kind of see them in action for the first time in 2025. It's been a while with them on the road, so it's nice to actually be at the CN Center watching a game at that caliber after nearly a month.
Yeah, I know it's been roughly 3 weeks since the Cougars have had a home game, and it was nice to see Seattle come to town. Some very hard-checking hockey between those two teams. Seattle comes in and stuns the crowd in the CN Center with a 3-1 victory over the Prince George Cougars, and the Cougars answer back, getting their revenge on the Saturday night, splitting the weekend, and keeping that 3-point gap above the Victoria Royals for first in the BC Division.
Yeah, and of course Victoria loading up. They had got Johnny Hicks from the Brooks Bandits, Brendan Lazowski, Kenta Isajay from Saskatoon and Wenatchee, respectively. So they are loading up to potentially supplant the Cougars up top the BC Division crown. Of course, Cougars still in the process of making their moves ahead of Thursday's deadline, but should brace for a pretty fun finish second half of the year. But I thought even though Seattle is kind of on the outside looking in and in that rebuild mode, I thought both Friday and Saturday games were kind of that typical blue-collar, physical, playoff-type brand games that you're going to see in the spring, especially Saturday's game where he had a couple fights, got feisty towards the end. Cougars, of course, getting away with a 3-0 victory, but you can kind of see the hatred amongst those two rival clubs ratcheting up again towards the second half of that back-to-back. And it was nice to see. I thought it was a pretty good test for the Cougars, despite the fact Seattle's likely a team they're not going to see in the playoffs.
Yeah, of course, Seattle only 12 wins on the season for them, and looking to be trending towards a lottery position in the WHL Prospects draft. But, you know, they still have some veteran pieces on that team that have been around that winning culture in Seattle. And, I mean, Sawyer Minio was one of those pieces, played for the World Juniors, and didn't even make it back to Seattle. He gets shipped off to go play with the Calgary Hitmen in a blockbuster deal to kick off the trade deadline stretch here. But a very solid coaching staff in that organization. They still embrace pride in their winning culture. And I mean, if you want to rebuild your team, you want to instill those habits early. And right now they're doing that with this team.
Yeah, and they're very structured in terms of the way that they play. They're very direct and intentional in terms of how they want to play each and every night. We saw that to a T over the course of the weekend. Of course, Seattle taking one off of us on the Friday. They got a couple lucky bounces there to aid in that victory, but that 3-0 game was not an easy game for the Prince George Cougars. Cougars played well in that contest, but Seattle did make them earn everything that they did get on the Saturday.
Yeah, and I mean, you go play it back to the Friday night, it almost looked like maybe the Cougars underestimated Seattle coming in. Of course, they beat them 4-2 at the tail end of their road trip on the U.S. swing, coming back to Prince George. And, I feel like, it was a bit of a wake-up call, as there was moments in that game where you couldn't tell that one of the last place teams in the conference was taking on the second place team.
Yeah, and they played a really solid road game, and that goes to their system, their discipline, their structure. And when you run up against teams like that are structurally sound, even if they are lower in the standings, oftentimes that means a very tough night for you. And they were on their game with the Thunderbirds, and they got the required bounces necessary to take that first half of the doubleheader.
And also to note, too, just two excellent goaltending performances. First, they made the decision to start their backup, Graydon Malinoski, Friday night. He puts up a really good performance, and maybe a bit streaky at times. He is a rookie in the season, and so getting a nice convincing win over, a pretty offensively talented team here that's going to be a potential playoff favorite was a good notch on his belt, and then followed up by Scott Ratzlaff, who, Buffalo Sabres prospect, has learned well under Thomas Milic when he was the starter in Seattle. And, maybe he goes on the move at the deadline. We'll talk about that later, but just two very good performances in net for Seattle.
Yeah, it's a team that's very good in between the pipes. And, of course, when you trickle that down further down the pipeline, what does this mean for Jackson Dicker? 17-year-old, highly thought of prospect with the Thunderbirds, had some time already this year with the big club. He's the Cariboo starter for now. See what the next, 24 to 96 hours looks like for him, depending on when or if Seattle does pull the trigger for Scott Ratzlaff. I was talking to their GM up in the media booth closest to me during the weekend. He did say, we got a couple calls on Scott, but nothing imminent as of yet. But you got a guy waiting in the wings in Jackson Dicker that's a very big athletic goaltender, second-team All-Star in the Circle K tournament in Calgary when the Cougars went 2-2. So these next 4 days could have a trickle-down effect, not just on the Thunderbirds, but also the Cariboo Cougars U18 program as well.
Yeah, I think looking at it, for the Cariboo Cougars, when Jackson Dicker started the season with Seattle, knowing the state of Seattle's team right now, being in that first year of a rebuild, a retool, whichever what you want to call it, knowing that 19-year-old Ratzlaff could very well be on the move to a team that's going to go on a run this year, and the World Juniors possibilities as well. Early on in the season that things were being planned out, it was very clear that, Dicker, we're going to have him here for a time. We'll be very lucky to have him here for a full season, but it's also very likely that we're not going to have him by the end of the season. And in regards to that, I think Adric Ligas has been equally as exceptional between the pipes for the Cariboo Cougars, where it really feels like a 1A situation in net.
Yeah, it's been that way down the stretch. There have been times where Dicker started the first half of the doubleheader, been other times where it's been the other way around, and that's not a slight on either one guy. It's just that they're both pretty close in terms of talent. Obviously, they play a little bit different in terms of their technical game. Jackson, of course, being 6'6", 6'7", Ligas maybe relying more on his positioning in terms of his size as well. So they both bring a little something different to the table just based on their sheer size alone. But either one, very, very capable.
Very, very capable, and both at times this year have stolen hockey games for this U18 AAA Cariboo Cougars Hockey Club. And I think either which way the cookie crumbles for the Cariboo Cougars heading into January 9th, I think they're going to be very comfortable with having a guy like Ligas still here for the rest of the year.
Yeah, and of course, then you have to think about, if you do lose Dicker, you got to make a decision between Ramos Gadbois and potentially Ivan Anderson, who you call up from the U17s, and then everyone essentially gets bumped up one spot in the pecking order for the rest of the year. Yeah,
I think the general consensus for that nod would be Ramos Gadbois. I mean, he did start the year. He looked good in the starts he had with the U18s, and I think once he got back down to the U17 AAA program, he did bring a lot of stability on that back end. He's been a leader in his position, and I think he's helped Ivan out a lot in his development, who's been a year younger. And I think if push comes to shove and Dicker isn't back with the Cariboo Cougars, my pick would be Ramos Gadbois to back up Ligas.
I think either one's a really good decision. Obviously, we had Ivan up. Ramos Gadbois played that back-to-back with the U17s at home prior to the Christmas break. Ivan Anderson getting the win in the second half of that road doubleheader with the U18s. So Ivan proving he can win at this level as well. So choices of plenty for the Cariboo Cougars coaching staffs.
Yeah, choices of plenty, and just overall a really good goaltending pipeline once again here for the Cariboo Cougars program, as you also do have Hayes Gerhardy and Brendan Perch right now playing for the U15s. Both similar situation as Ligas and Dicker. It's a 1A situation. Both goaltenders provide excellent goaltending, a chance for their team to win each night, and lots of exciting talent between the pipes to look forward to for Cougars fans.
And of course, with that, Cariboo Cougars back in action this weekend coming up. Of course, U18s fresh off a 2-2 showing at the Circle K Classic in Calgary. Not the finish they were looking for, but to be fair, running up against Buzzsaw and Shattuck St. Mary's, winning back-to-back Circle K titles in Calgary, defeating the Calgary Hockey Academy in that U18A final. Cariboo losing the first game to Sioux Falls, winning the next two to move on to stay in the A pool. Didn't quite get the draw they wanted going up against Shattuck St. Mary's, but really, to be fair, not many teams are going to beat the top-rated AAA program, not just in the tournament, but also in the entire United States. And you got to remember, too, the age groups in terms of how it's structured in the American teams, a little bit different. You have mostly 07s, 08s, some 09s in our system here in BC Hockey. But for Shattuck St. Mary's, you have 06s, 07s, and 08s. So for a lot of the guys that are not graduating this year, you're going against guys 2 to 3 years older than you, and sometimes that can make a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, Shattuck St. Mary's, one of the most reputable AAA programs in North America. I mean, you look at the list of the alumni that have gone and play in the NHL over the years. And Brendan, you did say when you look through the roster, there was about 11 players on that team that are already NCAA committed. So again, that program continues to pump a lot of high-level players with an age category above what we're allowed here in BC hockey. Really creates a lot of a gap, not just BC hockey, just, Hockey Canada in general, whether it's from Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan. You're not going to find an 06 playing in the AAA system. So Shattuck St. Mary's had a bit of that upper hand, but give Cariboo Cougars credit in that game. Yes, they did lose that game 7-1, but typically when you're being outworked by an older, bigger, and just faster team, you're going to take a lot of those penalties you don't want to take. I believe they only had one penalty in that game, so their composure was perfect, and they weathered the storm, and hats off to the Cariboo Cougars for putting forth their best effort.
Yeah, when you're playing essentially a college-level team that has 11 commitments, deck's already stacked against you as is. So you go into every game thinking you can win it, but also in the back of your mind that, it's a really good team that we're playing, and even if we do put up our best efforts, sometimes it just isn't your day where it might just not quite good enough.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it goes sometimes, right? You're going to end up playing a team where the odds aren't in your favor, and you block that out. You go in with the mindset of we're going to win this hockey game, but once you get into the action, once the game plays out, you start to really realize you're not going to win every game you play, and sometimes there is a team that's just that much better, and that is a bit of a humbling moment and a good learning experience for a team like the Cariboo Cougars in that situation.
Yeah, nothing to hang your head about. 2-2, you got to stay in the main pool for playoffs. Not quite the finish, but hopefully it's something they can build off of heading into the home stretch of this year in the BC Elite Hockey League. Still on top, albeit by a very slim margin against the Valley West Giants. Two big games between those two teams 2 weeks from now in the Winter Classic when Valley West does make their way to Fort St. James against U18. So two big games on the horizon from them 2 weeks from now. Of course, they're back in action this weekend as well on the road. So lots to look forward to if you're a Cariboo Cougar.
Yeah, lots of exciting stuff coming up for fans to look forward to. I mean, the Winter Classic is a historic event now. It's something that not just us here at Cariboo Hockey eagerly look forward to, but the teams that take their turns coming up to get this experience, the people in the communities local to the area who get to come out free of charge to come watch some excellent hockey on the outdoor game, which is always a different and more intimate atmosphere for the community. And I think it's going to be just a blast once again when we go out there to cover the games.
And of course, prior to that, this weekend coming up, busy weekend for hockey. Got the Prince George Spruce Kings coming off back-to-back road losses against Surrey and Chilliwack. They're at home against Alberni Valley Friday and Saturday. Prince George Products, Brady and Ken McIsaac, brief homecoming for them. Playing for the Bulldogs both nights. Spruce Kings looking to secure that final spot on the Coastal Conference. Nanaimo ending up splitting their games, so they are still 2 points ahead of Nanaimo after being tied the previous weekend. So big points on the line for Prince George there. And of course for us, being of course affiliated with the Cariboo Media team, U17s and the U15s at home for a pair of home games. This weekend as well. You got the U15s playing in kid number 2, while we have the U17s playing back-to-back home games at CN Center. Of course, Saturday afternoon / Saturday evening games, followed by 2 early Sunday morning contests there. Kid 1 is occupied, so that's not available to us this weekend. So busy weekend at the rink for us.
Yeah, a busy weekend coming up, and you know what? It's after having 2 weeks out of the rink, not having to be here to cover the games, it's been a nice break, but I think it's safe to say, I know for me, I'm sure for you and David here behind the camera, we're very excited to be back in the heat of it and start getting rolling here for the second half with, the Winter Classic fast approaching. We're going to have the school game on Valentine's Day in February at the Copar Memorial Arena. So another exciting event to look forward to, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun here heading into playoffs.
Yeah, and we'll kind of maybe bounce back between the trade deadline and the World Juniors. Of course, Canada not the finish they were looking for the first time in tournament history, getting bounced in back-to-back quarterfinals, fifth-place finishes in consecutive years. And just seemed to me that there were some questionable roster decisions, like a lot of media pundits and a lot of passionate Canadian hockey fans. It seems like there were just a strange aura around the team where, whether it was the player selection, canceling practices after a loss, and just maybe the selection of players, and it just seemed like there was no chemistry at all amongst his team, and if there was, it was very limited in spurts, and it just like the group as a whole just didn't really gel despite the favorable schedule.
Well, you ask any fan who's either played the game, is a part of the game in any capacity, or just, loves to watch the game. All across the spectrum of people that watch this tournament and watch the sport and are a part of the sport, looked at the roster that Hockey Canada picked, and more specifically Ann Holt and Cameron, and a lot of people didn't like that roster. And I think it was one of the first rosters I'd seen in my memory recent is like the last 10 years at least, where there had been that much dislike before the team even hit the ice. And I mean, can you really blame anyone for thinking that when you got, third overall pick to the Anaheim Ducks, Beckett Seneke, left off the roster. You got Perrick left off the roster. Michael Misa, who was one of the top point players and goal scorers in the OHL, off the roster. Yakimchuk, not even invited. Riley Height, cut from camp. Andrew Cristal leads the WHL in goals and one of the top goal scorers in the CHL.
Final cut.
You had Repkov, barely playing. You had Martone, barely playing and scratched. McKenna, chained to the fourth line. There was nowhere in this lineup where they could get any goals. And it came out too that Dave Cameron was canceling team practices at the tournament. So there's no chemistry and no ability to make chemistry because they're not even practicing as a team. So I think this whole tournament was a huge fumble for Hockey Canada, and I think there's no level of displacement of hate or frustration from any hockey fan here in Canada.
No, and obviously two omissions that Canada could not take, Tisha Ginland, Caden Lindstrom, due to injury. So, there were some social media people saying, well, why weren't they invited? Well, they couldn't invite him because they were hurt. Then, of course, you have Harrison Brunicki from Kamloops, who was initially named to the training camp roster, but had to bow out because of injury as well. So that's three quality guys that otherwise would have been available to you that were not due to injury. So that's, you give you a free pass there, but then there's everybody else that was either cut or left off the roster that has everybody up in arms, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you would have picked all of the players that we just mentioned that were, eligible to play, that weren't hurt, that could have been on this team, you would have had four lines that could provide elite offense. So if one line gets shut down, you have another line that can go right out there and capitalize. You wouldn't have an issue on the power play, right? So it's really interesting to see how, heading in, like, it almost looked like the plan was to try and match the depth charts of the lower tier countries in the tournament to prove a point that you could beat them, but you couldn't even beat them. You didn't medal for a second consecutive tournament, and now Hockey Canada has some really, some tough decisions to make, and they got to do a little bit of damage control and some PR management on this whole situation.
One of the bright spots that we will touch on, though, is Tanner Mollendijk, Saskatoon Blades, Nashville Predators top prospect, and of course McBride, BC. One of the top three players for Canada, played one of the highest ranking ice times in terms of players. I think he had the most ice time in the quarterfinal loss, 21 minutes. Workhorse back there, very defensive responsible, great skater, one of the top three players named by the Hockey Canada brass, and somebody that asserted himself very well in the tournament. And again, we'll bounce back to the trade deadline. One of the premier pieces still remaining that could be traded for in the next coming days, and he had a very strong tournament.
Yeah, I mean, Tanner Mollendijk was excellent. I don't think I noticed a bad shift in the games that I watched for their tournament. And, one of those defensemen that he's just at a point a game in WHL is Saskatoon, and of course they've had a really good run so far in the regular season. But the price for him is going to be high. His intelligence away from the puck, as well as with the puck, is just so high. The way that he skates, I don't think there's a better skater from the back end in the league right now as compared to Tanner Molendyk. And I feel like he's a player that a lot of teams are going to have a lot of interest in. And I mean, you see the return for Sawyer Minio that Seattle got from Calgary. 2 first-round picks, 2 fourth-round picks, 2 young prospects, right? So I mean, that's a pretty good package, and that starts to set the market price a little bit for a defenseman, a top pairing defenseman, I should add. And Tanner Molendyk, being probably the best defenseman in the league, is probably going to garner maybe 3 or 4 firsts plus in a deal.
And another player that was on that team that will also be well sought after, also on the blue line, is Caden Price from the Kelowna Rockets.
Yeah, I mean, Caden Price is, I think he's at an assist a game right now, and likely with setting up Chris Dahl in the power play, those two have been a connection point for that organization for the last couple of years now. 2 very talented players, but just another guy that carries a high level of skill that that teams are going to look for. And I mean, he's a guy that can just immediately boost your power play in many different ways. He can chip in on a penalty kill, and 5-on-5, he's just as good as anybody else in the league. So I think there's going to be a lot of interest in Caden Price as well.
And of course, with Kelowna hosting next year's tournament, they're going to need to restock and reload in terms of draft picks, capital, and roster players for next year. So Crystal and Price likely going to go at the deadline. Tija Gindl, of course, out for the season, so he's not available for trade this year. But lots of jockeying for position, and you take a look at the league standings as a whole in both conferences, there really isn't a lot of wiggle room anywhere.
No, I mean, it's super tight. It seems like the depth charts for a lot of organizations is very similar for this season. And, you're seeing a lot of games go either way depending on which matchup you have. And the only team so far that's really been able to separate themselves well above the rest is the Everett Silvertips. But, I'm looking to see post-deadline, as these deadline deals happen, you're going to see maybe a little bit of separation. So I think that gap with Everett and the other top teams in the West and East are going to close a little bit. But, so far they're the only team that's been able to really build a sizable lead in points in the standings.
And remember, too, Everett's window is a lot more wide open than most teams, and rumor has it they might load up next year and just stand pat after making their moves already this year. So Everett, I don't want to say they're playing with house money because obviously you expect to win, but Everett kind of in that wheelhouse where Prince George was in last year, where got a really good team, could take it all this year, but even if they stumble, a lot of the players that they have returning can come back next year, and they have a full stock of picks and prospects where they can take another run at it the season following. So Everett in a pretty nice spot as any team in the league, but you have other teams around them that are starting to load up as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at that Everett Silvertips roster. I mean, it's really paying dividends for making that deal with Kamloops when they hosted the Memorial Cup for Olin Zellweger. And I mean, it pretty much landed DuPont and a lot of other pieces they've been able to build with. And, because the window's going to be open for quite a bit of time, but it's also given them some assets to play with too, right? So like they don't have to use all of the draft picks to go in and draft and just build through the draft. They can draft some really good players, but then they can speed up their contention window by making some of those deals to really put all their chips in with the Landon DuPont era in Everett.
Yeah, so interesting few days to say the least amongst the junior hockey circles, especially in the Western Hockey League, with the trade deadline coming up on Thursday, of course. Anxiously awaiting to see what the Prince George Cougars do to upgrade their roster with them in win now mode this year. So should make for an interesting 30-plus games here in the Western Hockey League coming down the home stretch. We'll shift gears to the KI now. Williams Lake Mustangs winning one and losing one on the road. Quesnel River Rush losing back-to-back games in a shootout, so they collect some points there. Williams Lake, point back of chase for the final playoff spot in that Doug's Burke division. Quesnel right now sitting in third. They've had a very strong second half, or at least pre-Christmas scheduled, off to a better start, obviously collecting a couple points, turning the clock to 2025. You got Hunter Mile House still playing well in first place. Kamloops has been competitive all year, and there is a scenario where both Quesnel and Williams Lake could land a playoff spot each in their first seasons. Still some work to do on their ends still, but both teams have been very competitive all season long.
Yeah, I mean, both teams have, really put their best foot forward, and I think the intention on both organizations' side of it is, they want to establish a competitive culture, and they want to build that fan base. And it really looks like both communities have jumped on board with, each team, and it's really cool to see that level of excitement here in the North, in particular with Williams Lake and Quesnel for junior hockey.
Yeah, so there's that. Obviously, we mentioned that the Spruce Kings are home next weekend as well against Alberni Valley, which we mentioned close to the top of the broadcast. But lots of hockey action to look forward to as we head down the stretch in the second half of the year. We've got a busy slate, of course, with the Cariboo Cougars, and it's just kind of that fun time of year because it feels like once the Christmas schedule passes and once the trade deadline passes for their respective leagues, I know AAA doesn't have a trade deadline because it's still kind of under a different umbrella, but it just seems like once the first couple weekends of the New Year's passes, it's like snap your fingers and it's go time, and it seems like the quality of play and the intensity of the games starts to level up from January on. It's kind of like that second season.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big reason for that is, each team, you want to get that home seating because you're going to have those 3 games because of the 3-game playoff round. 3-game series in the playoffs for the BC Elite Hockey League, and you really want to have those 3 games at home, right? And with not a lot of gap in the standings, being a tight-knit, division that you're in, you really want to try and get that upper hand and get those games on your home turf.
Yeah, so lots of jockeying there. I know U15s are up near the top. Cariboo in first place. U17 a bit more challenging for them this year just due to the injuries and some of the suspensions, especially on the back end. So, but once they can get healthy, they've proven to be a formidable team as well. So the Cariboo program's looking strong. Northern Capitals in second place. They've had their moments as well. So lots to look forward to the second half of the season. And of course, we've talked at nauseum about the junior leagues as well in terms of the Spruce Kings making a push, the Cougars trying to maintain top spot, and that second seed in the Western Conference. So lots to talk about here in the months and weeks ahead for the hockey season. Anything else that we need to touch on before we bring a close to this episode?
I think before we get to that point, let's transition into our interview with Prince George, BC's very own Isaiah Berra, a.k.a. the Prospector.
Hello there.
Hi.
Hi.
HockeyNorth.
Yeah.
Hockey in the North.
That's right. All right. With me now, we have the Prospector, Isaiah Berra, with me here on this week's edition of Hockey North Weekly. For those of you just watching the podcast for the first time and are just maybe uber casual hockey fans, I guess let's just bring us on some of the rules of hockey here in terms of the way it's played. I mean, first let's go over hooking.
Okay, so hooking, that's when you take the stick, you get it around a guy and you pull. Okay, that's hooking. You're not allowed to do that. Can't do that.
Okay, let's just take us through slashing.
Slashing. Okay, so that's when you got the stick and give him a hit with it, and you can't do that one either.
Okay, let's talk about spearing.
Spearing. Okay, that one's that's when you take the stick at the nub there. Right? If you can do it once, you can do it a few times, kind of thing in the corner. All of that's spearing, and you also can't do that.
Yeah, so it's kind of like when you ram somebody's head into the turnbuckle.
It's the exact same. It's the exact same. Yeah, no, hockey and wrestling are pretty interchangeable in a lot of ways.
All right, so let's get right into it here. You're from Prince George minor hockey product. You got a hockey family pretty much. I mean, you got Renzo running the hockey school, PGSS. Your brother RJ played collegiately. He was a Spruce King. Your brother played Junior A, but in some of the Prairie provinces, and of course playing here locally. He's now coach at the Northern Capitals.
Mm-hmm.
How much of an inspiration was that for you, kind of having RJ and Hayden and your dad, who were obviously well known with the game, kind of inspire you to get your start in there?
Well, you know, growing up in Prince George, my fondest memories are when I was in elementary school. RJ's 7 years older than I am, so you know, there's quite an age gap. So when I was a kid, he was an older teenager, and watching him play for the Prince George Spruce Kings, that's where I really fell in love with the game of hockey. You know, I come from a hockey family. Every one of us plays it. But if I was to, you know, really look at a point in my childhood where hockey became important to me, it would be when I was sitting in the bleachers of the rolling mixed concrete arena watching my brother play for the Spruce Kings. You know, he made the team at 18 and was lower in the lineup. And then, you know, 3 full seasons, eventually he finished off as the captain there and was the top goal scorer in the league. And, you know, I was in the seat for every single home game. I didn't miss any of them. So yeah, that's when I really became inspired, was watching RJ's Spruce Kings career.
Yeah, he also got, I think, dealt to Victoria there at the deadline here in his last year.
Grand Prairie Storm. Yeah. And you know, he went to Grand Prairie because the Spruce Kings were out of the playoffs already, and Grand Prairie was in the running to be a championship team in the AJHL. So he went to Grand Prairie, and I actually went down and watched the first round of the playoffs when he was playing there. It wasn't the same. It wasn't the same at all. You know, like when you grew up in Prince George, there's a certain pride that you take in wearing a local team's jersey. Anyone in the North understands that. It doesn't have to be Prince George. That's where the teams are based. But anyone from the North knows that if you put on a Spruce Kings jersey, a Cariboo Cougars jersey, a Prince George Cougars jersey, there's a certain, you know, pride of, this is my hometown. I grew up here. This is like everything in your childhood builds to that moment. Right. So, yeah, I went and watched RJ in Grand Prairie. It wasn't the same. It really wasn't.
No.
It wasn't, no. And they lost in the first round, too. So, you know, what was it all for? Yeah. Right? You know, I should have stayed in PG and finished off there. But, hey, that's okay.
And RJ Berra, member of the Grand Prairie Storm, doesn't quite have the same cachet as RJ Berra, the Prince George Spruce Kings.
No, it's not the same at all.
Yeah.
No.
So your brother Hayden also played Junior A. I actually watched him play with Kindersley Clippers in his final season, where I used to broadcast the Melville games. This is when Melville swept Kindersley in the first round. Sorry, Hayden, but you know, I had to bring that in there.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I think he's over it by now.
Okay. Yeah, because he played. I think he played Manitoba, Saskatchewan, played a couple different places.
Hayden had a great Junior A career because of all the places that he played. You know, RJ was very much a Prince George Spruce King. Hayden got to travel. He got to play in Manitoba. He got to play in Saskatchewan. He got to play in BC. You know, I look at that career and I'm very jealous of that one because, you know, hockey offers you experiences to see places that you wouldn't have seen otherwise, and to be able to, you know, travel this country and to be able to say, like, I've not only been to those places but lived in those places, lived in the different provinces. I think he was very fortunate and you know, accomplished a pretty darn good Junior A career.
Yeah, and of course your dad, very well known in the city, Renzo Berra.
Yeah, he's so much better than all three of us. It's not even comparable. You know, we can talk about RJ and Hayden, and I mean, you can't really talk about me, but you can talk about those two all day long. And then it comes to Renzo, and you know, he's too humble. Like he doesn't ever talk about it. But you know, he had NHL tryouts. He dominated the Western League. Playing for the Seattle Breakers, which are now the Thunderbirds, but they were the Breakers now. Yeah. We have those jerseys in the basement, not even on display. They're like in storage, but we have them. I've seen them, and you know, Renzo was a great hockey player. He went to UBC and played there, and yeah, he had a great career. But you know, his love was definitely coaching.
Yeah.
and I think that says a lot about his personality. Like he was very good at hockey. You know, for what he did, it was great. An eye injury ended his career earlier than it should have. You know, if he doesn't get high sticked in the eyeball and loses vision in an eye, you know, where does his career go? I think it goes to the NHL. You're not going to hear, you know, him admit that because he's a humble guy, which goes to his personality, right? Like that's the kind of guy that you want coaching your kids, and that's the guy who's been coaching the kids in Prince George for the last 20 years, since 2002, right? He started Pullers Hockey. It's got an incredibly high performance division, but it also has a beginner program as well. Everyone gets to play hockey in this town because of him, right? And if you go to PGSS, you know, there's a beginner program. So if you've never put on a pair of skates before, well, guess what? Like, Renzo's going to make that a possibility for you, right? And I think that goes a lot to his personality. He's a humble guy. He's a great guy. Didn't pass that over to me, the humbleness, anyways. But you know, I'll say it for him. I'll say it for him because he's not going to.
Yeah. So let's circle back to you. Obviously, you're quite a bit younger than RJ. Let's take us through your days going through minor hockey, some of the things that you remember. You also have, you know, your best buds with Brogan O'Brien, a Prince George Cougars alumni. So I'd imagine you're pretty much close to the same age range there. And what was it like to kind of play and grow up with a player like that?
Well, Brogan grew up down the street from me.
Yeah.
Right. So he and I have a funny friendship. Growing up, I didn't like him at all because he was better than me. You know, I was getting cut from teams that Brogan was the all-star on. So, you know, that's not a guy I'm going to be friends with or like. But then once high school hit and, you know, we both ended up at PGSS, what happened was I got my license and I had a car, and Brogan and I were playing on the same midget AAA team. And it was just kind of like, hey man, like, can you drive me to school kind of thing? And I was like, okay, like, sure, you live down the street, I'll pick you up, right? And then it's funny how life works, because now that's one of my closest friends, and you know, it's funny, like, you start off enemies, and then down the road, you know, you're best friends. And don't get me wrong, like, the enemies thing, it was totally on me. Like, Brogan shouldn't have been that good for, in my opinion, or he shouldn't have been better than me at least, right? But he was. And then you know, I didn't like that. I didn't like that. But yeah, so Brogan grew up down the street. We played on the same team for 2 years, Bantam AAA, midget AAA, and then he was off on the Spruce Kings. Then he was off on the Cougars, you know, and then he played, you know, post-secondary in the CIS, and now he's off in Scotland.
Yeah,
he's off in Scotland. Yeah, he's injured right now, but he'll be back. He's playing professional hockey, right?
Yeah.
So,
no, he had a good career because he had a monster year with Cariboo, got off to a great start there with the Spruce Kings, and then catapulted that into a contract with the Cougars and had some good success there. So he's kind of one of those made in PG success stories where he went through the entire system, all the local teams, and was able to, you know, utilize his scholarship opportunities with playing in the Western Hockey League, and of course now playing professionally in Scotland. So he's kind of one of those success stories, if you will.
Brogan is homegrown. Like, he is homegrown when you look at the teams he's played for, right? And Fisher too, you know,
Yeah,
Fisher too.
yeah.
I remember going to a game. Fisher was always the younger brother. He was always the younger brother, right? So we picked on him and stuff. And then, you know, I went to a Cougars game, and I go up to the menu to order a thing at the gimmick, the cafeteria thing, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
They had the Fisher O Burger.
Yeah.
The Fisher O Burger being sold at the CN Center back when he was playing. I dying laughing. Like, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I didn't order one, but I mean, you know, pretty cool that he had a burger named after him. Old Fish.
Yeah. Do you have like any minor hockey memories in terms of like tournaments or other players that you kind of grew up with through hockey that you're still close with now?
Friends?
Yeah.
Oh, those are my closest friends to this day. You know, that's the thing about hockey is you know, you want to make the NHL, you want to go play university, you want to go play pro overseas, you want to do all these things, but you know, barely anyone gets to, right? Like, that's barely anyone does. Like, RJ got to, Brogan gets to, Brogan O'Brien, right? Like, but you know, for the rest of us, really all you have at the end of the day is the memories and the relationships and the friendships. Like, I love being in town because, you know, I get to go to the bar and see, I played on that team with that team with that guy, right? And all your old teammates are now your friends as an adult, and that's a real important part of the game. That it's hard to understand that part of it when you're playing, when you're a kid. That like, hey, like this teammate that you're sitting next to, when all of this is said and done, that guy's still going to be around. And that's an important part of the game of hockey. And that's a part of the game that I think that Prince George and the programs around here really cater to and emphasize, because Prince George is a born here, live here, die here kind of town. Like a lot of our locals are always going to be here and have always been here. So who you know in high school is who you know when you're an adult. And the game of hockey really, like I could go through the old lineup, like Brian Albee, like
Josh Connolly.
Josh Connolly lives in Vancouver now.
Yeah.
Whenever I travel there for wrestling, I crash on his couch to save hotel money. And Josh Connolly, great guy. And Brogan and Jordan Lowe. Jordan Lowe, when we were playing on Cariboo Cougars, and he was dating, Stu Malgunis's daughter, Jaden, right?
Oh, yeah.
And decade later, I just went to their wedding, right? Went to their wedding. So that's the way this town works. It's a great place. And what you're doing in the moment of, playing hockey, it's going to extend beyond, when you hang up the skates.
Mm-hmm. And of course, too, you're also the PGSS Athlete of the Year in 2011.
Yeah, that was a really important thing. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah,
2011 Grade 8 Athlete of the Year at PGSS. It's funny, whenever I tell people about this, I say, oh yeah, I was really good at hockey, and like I was good on wrestling, I was good on the mat. Truth is that I was a really good volleyball player.
Yeah.
But, I only played that one season. That was probably my best sport at that age. But 2011 Grade 8 Athlete of the Year. Yeah, very, very prestigious award.
Well, you played the 1 year for Cariboo. What do you remember about that season?
I remember being introduced to a new level of competition, a new level of commitment that really didn't work with me. And because I'll be honest, Cariboo was the highest level of hockey that I played. I don't think it was for skill. I think that I was, and that's not being arrogant. I do think that I was a pretty decent hockey player. I just don't think I was committed. Like, you come to Cariboo and there's a certain level of expectation now that this isn't minor hockey. This is closer to junior hockey. This is probably more professionally ran than most junior hockey programs are, right? So you got to be at the rink at a certain time for warm-up. You got to practice hard, right? Every weekend is on the road, or you're in town, but it feels like you're on the road because of just how, restricted and how much focus you're putting into the games at hand. And I just wasn't that committed. Like I didn't like that. I think that says a lot about, I love this game, but I love this game as a guy playing in the game and watching the game, but not the guy at practice. I don't like practices. Even now, I've gone out for a few practices with RJ and Hayden over the years to push pucks. I don't enjoy it. I don't like practicing. I don't like hockey enough to go out and practice. Which hey, that's fine. That's fine. It's not everyone can play at the level of the Cariboo Cougars. Not everyone can play at the level of the Spruce Kings and the Cougars, right? It takes a certain level of commitment. And what's really great about the Cariboo Cougars program is that they're willing to essentially reveal that to the players. Like, hey, this might not be for you. That doesn't mean that there's not something that isn't for you later. Like I've done pretty well in wrestling so far, in professional wrestling, because it is for me. I'm never complaining about training in that situation. But yeah, Cariboo was incredible though. It was a fun year. A lot of teammates are still friends with me. We're still friends. And it was eye-opening though. It was eye-opening.
And I was just going to say, it was probably an eye-opener, and you kind of got to see that firsthand with a guy like Trevor Sprigg, who demands a lot out of his play.
He does, and that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be. Like just because it was too much for me doesn't mean that it wasn't the right amount, right? just because Sprague was asking a lot out of me at that time and I didn't want to give it to him, that doesn't mean that that's the wrong way to do it, right? I think that he runs an exceptional program, and that's why it's led to, a Stanley Cup for a guy like Brett Connolly.
Yeah, Brett Connolly, of course, winning with the Washington Capitals, Cariboo Cougar, PG Cougar, first round pick. So you come from this hockey family, you accomplish all these things, you realize that hockey isn't for you. You're in the film industry for a while.
Yeah.
And then you decided to maybe take a bit of a U-turn and say, Dad, brothers, I want to be a professional wrestler. How did that conversation go over?
Well, that conversation was hilarious. I mean, I come from an athletic background, and then I worked in the film industry a bit. I come from an entertainment background. And really what I was looking for was something to be good at. Because it's hard to find it's hard to find something that you're not only passionate about but that you're also talented at, and I hadn't found that in my life at that point. So I said, I want to go be a professional wrestler, and I said, do you think that's a good idea? I asked all my friends and people. I went, I've been thinking about this thing. Like, should I go be a pro wrestler? And everyone said yes. Every single person said, I think that works with your skill set. That works with your personality. You should go and do that. There was 4 people who said no. Can you guess
all
who?
Family members?
All 4 family members, right? Yeah. RJ was a no. Hayden was a no. Renzo was a no. And my mom actually was a no, you can't. But I did. I said, I think that I gotta try. I gotta try. And gosh, when I started, I went down to Calgary to do my initial training with a guy named Cutthroat Chris Knight. He's probably the best trainer in Canada. And after 3 months, he's an Australian guy, and he goes, after 3 months, he goes, mate, this isn't, you're not very good at this, mate. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm really not. Like, I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out pro wrestling for the life of me. And but he said, but you seem to be having fun, so maybe stick it out, mate, and see where it goes. Like, you got nothing better to do. And I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. I don't really got anything better to do right now, so might as well stick it out and see how it goes. And it's one of those things where over time, if you're committed and you're also like aggressive in the way that you focus on something, you can really get good at it. And what might not have been a natural skill on day one, I think just through the intensity in which I train, I've revealed natural abilities that just took a minute. It just took a minute, and now I'm doing it full time.
Yeah, so you went through Calgary, you went through the independent promotion start, you went to the Jacques Rougeau tournament, you've been in Texas, you've had a pretty good meteoric rise over the past 2 to 3 years, I would say. I mean, your promos every time we see them are pretty excellent as a prospector. How would you describe your ascension through kind of the minor/independent ranks over the past couple of years?
I would describe it as very fortunate, for one. Definitely very fortunate. I mean, like Jacques Rougeau, he runs a tournament, a national tournament, where wrestlers all across Canada submit to compete. And then he narrows that list of about 60 applicants down to 20 based off of their portfolio. I was selected. Then it went through a tournament process where, I went to Montreal 3 times in a very short span of time to compete in the tournament, because I made it through the quarters, then I made it through the semis, then I made it through the finals. And I came up just a little bit short. But, to get the opportunity to be a part of the competition was very fortunate. And then, in Texas, I trained with Booker T, 2-time WWE Hall of Famer, world heavyweight champion. I trained with him. He runs a TV show called Reality of Wrestling, and and they play on TV across America, and I got the opportunity to have a match on TV for them. And yeah, once again, just fortunate. I mean, the things that I was lacking in hockey, the commitment, the wanting to practice, the wanting to put all my time into it, I have that for wrestling. I have that for wrestling, and so it's been a really good 2 years into my career, and yeah, it does come down to with wrestling is interesting. Wrestling is interesting because just like hockey, you need to be tough to be able to do it. You need to be gritty to be able to do professional wrestling, and I think that is something that people from Prince George have an advantage of over people not from the North. Like, I think that we're built differently in this area, and I get in trouble for saying this sometimes, but I say it anyway because I like it. And it's that, we were Maclean's Magazine's most dangerous city in Canada back-to-back years, like 2010, 11, 12. That is the culture that I grew up in, right? I was a teenager growing up with that headline. And it's not necessarily the best headline, okay, but I do think that you grow up tougher when you grow up in that culture. You grow up meaner, a bit grittier, right? And I think that that's why our northern hockey players are so dang tough, and that's why I think that my professional wrestling career is off to such a good start, because I'm working and wrestling as someone from the North, someone from Prince George. And when the local teams up here, like the Northern Capitals, the Cariboo Cougars, the Spruce Kings, the Prince George Cougars, and then even the younger teams, when those teams are working from that mindset of we're mean, we're tough, we're better than you, and even if we're not as skilled, we're gonna outwork you, right? That's when you find success, right? When you really accept where you're from.
So you've talked about your ascension in terms of your wrestling career over the past 2 years. We touched on how, what it means to grow up in that gritty culture like you experienced there in Prince George, and how kind of that sets sometimes the hockey teams apart and the athletes sometimes in Prince George and across the region compared to the Lower Mainland due to that grittiness and, that's the kind of blue-collar attitude. I kind of want to ask you, what's next for you in terms of the progression of your wrestling career? What do you have lined up? What are your short, long-term goals that you kind of want to achieve to continue climbing up that ladder now that you've got a taste of it at that higher level?
Yeah, long-term goals. I won't say that I don't have a few. But I don't want to also put the value of my career in that mindset of I want to get here in 10 years, so therefore everything I do up until that point is meaningless until I get to the top of the mountain. Because really the top of the mountain, I don't think that you'll find happiness there if you're not enjoying the ride up, right? So I really do just look at life and professional wrestling in 6 months ahead. I don't look further than 6 months ahead. And right now, 6 months ahead is I'm going to be touring Kentucky this summer. I'm going to be doing the fair shows, the old Macho Man Randy Savage tours, town to town to town, following fairs in the Deep South. I'm real looking forward to that. And then there's local shows here in Prince George. January 24, 25, I'm here at the Civic Center for primetime wrestling. And then after I did the Booker T TV show, the top promotion in Western Canada, which is Top Talent Wrestling, they run out of Edmonton and Calgary. I got on their roster, so I'm there monthly, and that's been the real next step for me in my career development is every month going into that locker room and onto that show, which is really the next level. So just focusing on keeping my spot on that card and in that locker room, and also rising up to the more marquee matches.
There's a lot of choreography and a lot of creativity that a lot of the wrestlers get in terms of their matches, and sometimes it varies depending on the type of match and who they're fighting and et cetera, et cetera. You have a film background, and your promos, of course, are top notch and they're well known. And does kind of having that work experience, working behind a camera and on a production crew, how is that positively translated to how you sell and market yourself and your fights, and maybe go into that behind the scenes look, you know, the hours before a fight where you organize how you want a match to look so that it captivates the audience pretty much at every turn. Just maybe discuss that a little bit.
Yeah, it comes from my background in film, but it also comes from actually my mom as well. Everyone speaks about Renzo Berra, all the time, especially around the rink. But my mom, Monica, is a librarian. And so I also grew up, surrounded by books, and that is the best environment to learn and understand storytelling, right? And that's what professional wrestling is. It's storytelling. So when I, whenever I have a match that I need to build for and I need to sell tickets for, what's the story? What's the purpose? Because no one cares about me going into the ring and fighting a guy unless there's a reason for why that fight's happening, right? There needs to be a conflict in order for the resolution, and the resolution is always going to be a wrestling match. So what's the conflict? Why are we fighting, right? That's storytelling 101, right? Maybe even before 101. That's storytelling 0, okay? Like, it's the most basic thing. And that to me is always super important, is why am I fighting this person? And the other part about that is you got to be honest. You got to be honest, because no one likes a liar, and people can tell if you're lying. They can tell if you're being dishonest. So the Prospector, wrestling character, and myself, they're not different. Maybe a bit more exaggerated at times. Okay, sure, but not much. And that's super important. Is that you're honest about who you are, about why you do things. And yeah, it's genuineness. Genuineness is key when it comes to promos, right? People always say you have such great promos, you're so comfortable in front of the camera. Yeah, I'm comfortable because I'm being myself, right? I'm comfortable because I'm not playing a character, right? The character is me. So I'm just being myself, and people can tell that, right? They can tell that. And you also got to be a bit fearless too, right? You gotta sometimes, say things that might get you in a bit of trouble later, but that's okay. If it's true, it's true.
Yeah. And some of those local shows, you've come out with your cowboy hat, your Prince George Spruce Kings jersey. You actually had a match there where the Spruce Kings kind of got involved in that thing outside the ring there after one of your matches. Just talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, that was hilarious. So I went and gave the Spruce Kings a pregame speech, right? I went and gave them a pregame speech, and then they went out and just hammered the team that they were playing. So whatever I said worked. And then that night they came to the show, and my match was done. So I was actually sitting just off to the side, like secretly watching, and the Spruce Kings were getting pretty invested in the match, and they were getting pretty heated and pretty hot, and essentially one of the some of the wrestlers just were egging them on, and a few of the Kings, I imagine the guys from the North who play on that team decided, let's go see how much of this guy is just talk, right? So they got up out of their seats, they walked over towards the entranceway, and they were giving it to him, and then some of the other Kings start going, like maybe I'll follow. So then I started egging them on, going like, get him, like fight, get him, like seeing, what's gonna happen. Like, this is pretty good. This is entertaining for me now, right? Like, I was on that. Like, yeah, my night was done. I was in the crowd. Like, let's see what the Spruce Kings do. Let's see what they get up to. Yeah. So they went and they just gave it to them. And there was a video online and stuff that I watched a million times and just couldn't stop laughing. Like, it's good stuff. They're they're a good team. They're a good team, and yeah, it's stuff like that, you know.
Yeah. So let's talk about your all-star team in regards to the players in terms of the local teams that are on Spruce Kings, Cariboo Cougars, Northern Capitals, and these PG Cougars. Just take us through what your local all-star team looks like.
Yeah, I get to be coach too. I get to be coach. That's gonna be fun. You know, you gotta have a goalie. You gotta have a goalie. So I was in the alumni game this year, the Cariboo Cougars alumni game. I actually was cut from the alumni game. It's a funny story. Trevor Sprague cut me from the alumni game. So I posted, you know, online saying, guess I'm cut. And Sprager got some backlash. You know, a few people wrote in and were like, Sprager, this guy scored the overtime winner of the Spirit game. You know, this guy was grade 8 athlete of the year in 2011. Someone mentioned that I, you know, body slammed the Barlow Creek Butcher through a table at a primetime wrestling show. So Sprager relented and went, yeah, you know what? I made a mistake. We should have the Prospector in the alumni game. And man, was I upset when he told me that I had to play because I hadn't skated in a decade. And you know, I got a bum ankle from wrestling, and geez, during the warm up, I couldn't look up and skate at the same time. Like, you know, just keep your head up, right? I couldn't. I was so lost out there. But you know, luckily for all the mistakes I was making, we had a real good goalie in net, Ryder Green. He's from Prince George, local kid playing on the Spruce Kings, and Cariboo Cougars alumni. And you know what was so interesting when I was watching him was he was so confident. Like he wasn't like moving like crazy. He was just in net, hanging out, like the same way that, you know, you might go to the bar and have a beer, like just relax. Like he looked so calm. And when you see a guy like that in net, he knew exactly what he was doing. I think he made, what did he make, 30 saves in the first period because my alumni team was so bad. We ended up winning the game because the older guys ran out of gas down the road. You know, they came out hot, but they ran out of gas. We ended up winning. But that first period, I think Ryder Green stopped 30 shots. And you know, I've seen him play live on the Spruce Kings too, but it wasn't until he was like making up for the mistakes I was making and you know, getting me out of jail that I thought, you know, that guy's going to be on my all-star team. So Ryder Green's in net. And then on D we got Ryan Richter, right? Prince George, Smithers kid.
Prince George Cougar Prospect.
Prince George Cougar Prospect, right? So northern kid playing in the north, you know. That's real cool. You know, he's signed. Yeah. Signed on the dotted line, as they say, right? He did that. Yeah. Northern Capitals. I got Stacia Hebert. You know, she's going to be going to school in Windsor.
That's right.
Right? So not only does she have a spot on that team, but she has a spot on my all-star team.
Yeah.
Did you see the Northern Capitals got a dressing room?
Yeah.
They did, finally, after all these years. Right? Took long enough. That team's been around forever. No locker room, right? Yeah. No locker room. And for the level that those girls are playing at, they need a locker room.
Yeah.
And just it was actually just yesterday they found out that they have one, and you know, that's my brother Hayden. He's coaching that team, and he spearheaded getting them a dressing room. It's painted with their logo. It's got the signage up, and I think that's a real big accomplishment, but an overdue one. You know, but hell, they got a locker room now, and they're gonna have a great season, end of this season because of it. Because now, you know, you got a home. Like, where do you put your gear?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So they got a locker room. They got a place to hang up the skates. Yeah. So anyway, I have Stacia on D with Ryan on my all-star team. Then I got Rylan Bissett.
Yeah.
You know, he's from Chetwynd.
Yeah.
Plays on Cariboo here. I went and watched the Cariboo game, the teddy bear toss game, and the Cariboo Cougars' entire power play is just Bissett taking one-timers. And I'm like, hey, what more do you want? Like, that's the exact power play that I would have written out. It's the power play that I'm going to have on my all-star team, is him just taking one-timers. He shoots it so hard. Like, I'd love to know what that kid's bicep curl is in the gym. You know? Like, it's so fast, so hard. So Bissett, great one-timer. He's on my all-star team. Then, you know, he's injured right now, but I got Brogan O'Brien on my All-Star team.
He's your overager.
He's my overager. Brogues, you're my overager. Congrats. Heal up in Scotland and get ready because you're going to be wearing my All-Star jersey pretty soon. And I think that's a very big thing of me to put Brogan on the team because I was so jealous of him for so many years that I think that shows growth as a human for me to include Brogan on that team. So round of applause for Brogan for making the team, but round of applause for me for putting him on it because really I if you had told me a decade ago, hey, you're going to put Brogan on your All-Star team, I would have said there's no chance I want that guy to accomplish anything. But now, now I'm a bit more accepting of how much better he is than I am at hockey.
You always need a big guy down the middle to be a difference maker on the ice.
The big Irishman.
Yeah.
The big Irishman. And then, so I talk a lot about Prince George. I talk a lot about the North and how we're built differently up here and tougher. But you can come from out of town and still have that quality. So my captain of the All-Star team right now is Kazumo Sasaki from Nishi, Tokyo, Japan. He's on the Spruce Kings right now. I met him. And he's such a nice kid. We shook hands and I said, what brings you to Canada? And he goes, I moved from Japan because it was always my dream to be a hockey player in Canada. And now he's leading the Spruce Kings in points. Every time I watch them, my eye is always on him because he's just flying around the ice. And we have something in common because I say Kaz, it's funny that you came to Canada to learn how to play hockey, and that was your dream because my dream is to move to Japan and become a sumo wrestler. So look at that, we were meant to meet. He's the captain of my All-Star team. Right now, he's actually playing for Team Japan at the U18s. And, he's representing his country and he represents the North so well. He's not from here, but he plays like he is. And that's really all that matters with these programs. And, so Kazumo Sasaki, you're the captain of my All-Star team, bud.
Yeah. So I always talk about pregame routines with the players, but now that you're a wrestler, do you have a set routine that you have to do to get mentally psyched up for a match?
Yeah, wake up hungover. Find coffee from the local 7-Eleven, get in my car, drive 3 hours to the next town, jump rope, build a sweat, put on the baby oil to look jacked. It's a secret. It's a secret. Baby oil, it makes you look stronger. It does. It makes you look more jacked. It's a secret. It's an aesthetic business. It's fine. And then, go out and wrestle the match. And then after the match, go to the bar.
Yeah.
If it's not, after the show, you go to the bar and have a few drinks, but some of the shows are in bars and you don't even have the inconvenience of leaving. So, right, you get your envelope with the cash in, you just immediately pass that off to the bartender. And then wake up the next day hungover, go to the 7-Eleven, get a coffee, drive 3 hours to the next town, put on the baby oil. That's the game plan. That's the game plan.
All right, so I'll ask you another question that we asked the players. So,
do they have a different routine than that?
Well, probably.
I hope so.
I hope so.
So,
This is stated.
you talked about your All-Star team. So, out of all the years you played hockey locally, or some of the teams you played on, if you were stranded on a desert island with three of your teammates, or three guys that were teammates of you, growing up, who would they be?
Desert island, hey?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
So you and three of your teammates through the years.
Me and three of my teammates through the years.
Yeah.
Huh. you know, if you're stuck on a desert island, you need like to create kind of like a, you know, society. Who would I have on that desert? You know, I probably wouldn't have Brogan because he doesn't tan very well. So I'm actually cutting him from my desert island team. Yeah, I think, geez, you know, if I could pick myself 3 times, I know that we'd have a really good island that functioned well, but I guess I can't do that, hey?
No.
No.
There's no alcohol on the island.
Is Josh Connolly one of your selections?
Josh Connolly is a selection. Josh Connolly is on the island. Josh is on the island, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm gonna let my brother Hayden James on the island just so we can exile him from the island, right? To show like, cause I'm gonna need to show authority as the leader of this island. So I'm gonna have to kick someone off, and it's gonna be him. So Hayden can come on the island and then very soonly be removed from the island in a show of power, right? So Hayden, Connolly, Brogan doesn't tan, so he's not on it, and then. I'm gonna bring Sprague on the island. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm gonna bring Sprague on the island. That's you know.
He's going to be the muscle.
Sprague's gonna be the muscle. He's gonna be the guy who grabs Hayden and throws him into the ocean. I'm bringing Sprague on the island. Yeah. Trevor, pack your suitcase. Pack your swim shorts. Yeah, there's my 3. Josh Connolly, Hayden, Trevor Sprague.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
I guess any final thoughts as we wrap up this interview, just in terms of wrestling or hockey or anything else that maybe we didn't quite touch on that you want to talk about?
I think that it's very impressive what Prince George hockey does in the realm of professionalism. Like this even from this podcast, you know, you guys have a podcast that's incredible. Like, show me another team in the league, another program in the league that has a podcast going, right? Yeah, and for the kids who are here, for the kids who are playing hockey in Prince George on any of the teams, what I would say is this: know that you're in the right spot. You are playing in the right place. May not always feel like that. But guess what? That's because you have to be held accountable for your actions. You have to be held accountable for how you're playing. And you got to be pushed, because it's not an easy game, nor should it come easy to anyone. And you're in the right spot to grow and develop as a hockey player, but also as a person. Like, my success with professional wrestling, a large part of that is from playing hockey in Prince George. A large part of it, because you learn core values, you learn skills in this trade that will then work in other ones. Like, there's people who played hockey in Prince George who are now doing so many great things not hockey related, right? Because what we're doing around here is setting you up for the rest of your life. And very few people get to be Brett Connolly and win a Stanley Cup. Very few people get to go overseas and play professional, right? But mostly everyone, if they commit to it, move on to other parts of life and use what they learned here to, be strong in what they do.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much. The Prospector, Isaiah Berra, being this week's guest on Hockey North Weekly. And that'll wrap it up for this week's episode of our podcast. Thank you very much.